What if you
Points directly at a development that we currently have. This is not yet public.
Inspiring the evolution of embedded design since 1988. Learn more at circuitseller.com.
welcome everyone? Today we're talking with Sumeet Kumar, one of the founders of a company called Innatera. Now, this is a Dutch company, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and how it comes to be in existence. Sumeet, welcome to Circuit Cellar. Tell me a little bit about the company.
Thank you so much for having me. Innatera is a Dutch semiconductor company. We were born out of close to a decade of research at the Delft University of Technology. And basically, what we do is we bring brain like intelligence directly to sensors. Our entire mission is to move powerful AI capabilities directly to the sensor so that we can process the world's data as soon as it is captured directly at the source. And by doing that, we eliminate the need to move raw data right from these sensors to the cloud, which is a process today that costs a lot of energy, costs a lot of money, and takes a lot of time, and frankly violates your privacy. We're moving away from all of that towards this world where data is converted into actionable insights as soon as it is captured.
Very good. There's a lot there that we're going to dig into as we go forward. But before we do, if I could ask you to tell me a bit now about you and your role in the company and how you came to be sitting here talking to me today.
I'm one of the co-founders of Innatera. I serve as a company CEO. My own background is in microprocessor design. It's something that I've done for the last 18 years. I hold a PhD in the space from the Delft University of Technology. After that, I was with Intel developing processors that went into camera phones. And then I was responsible for setting up to 50 million euro R&D programs with the European Commission, basically bringing next generation intelligence into automated vehicles. And today, many of those technologies are available in cars that are currently driving around on the roads. In 2018, I set Innatera up with a group of my colleagues at the Delft University of Technology, basically commercializing about 10 years of research that we had done into brain inspired computing and energy efficient computing. And that's essentially how Innatera was born, and how I came about to doing brain inspired computing day in and day out.
Very good. Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We truly appreciate it. Now, one of the things that I'd like to talk about, the last few years in AI have brought us an entirely new universe of buzzwords. Can you tell me a little bit about what neuromorphic processing is and what makes it special?
Neuromorphic essentially means like the brain. And the entire objective of this field of neuromorphic computing has been to take principles that come out of neuroscience and to implement them in computer architectures so that we can recreate the efficiency of the brain, the performance of the brain in the silicon world. And the word neuromorphic has taken different meanings over the years. People claiming that anything which is a neural network is automatically neuromorphic. What Innatera does is it builds chips that very closely mimic the physical structure of your brain. And on these chips, we run the neural network of your brain, a very specific kind of neural network called a spiking neural network. And the entire principle that we're going after here is that your brain is not a machine that fires all of its neurons every single cycle. Your brain is an event driven machine. And what that means is as you perceive things in the world around you, as you find patterns in sensory data that you're receiving from your different organs, there are different parts of your brain that light up. For instance, as I'm speaking to you, every word that you're hearing causes a unique cluster of neurons in your brain to light up. And every time you hear the same word, it's the exact same cluster which lights up. So it's not like the entirety of your brain is activating every time you're hearing me speak. It's specific parts of your brain. And that's really what makes your brain so efficient. It has different parts to do different things. It's able to understand the relationships between different patterns. It can understand causation very well over time. And all of these things make it very powerful when it comes to processing sensory data, even when it's very poor in quality. We take all of these principles and we apply them to the physical world. So, in finding patterns, in finding meaningful information in data coming out of sensors. That's what we do with our processors. And really, by mimicking the brain, we bring the next generation of energy efficiency into these systems. So you can have sensory systems that run on tiny batteries for long stretches of time without you needing to really recharge those devices repeatedly.
Well, now, as you say, it sounds like this would have a dramatic impact on energy use for the processor. But are there other benefits to this approach as well?
There are a number of approach benefits to using, brain-inspired computing approach, and the energy efficiency is probably the biggest standout benefit. Outside of that, you have a very clear latency benefit. So think about this: if I'm sitting in front of you, I pick up a heavy object and I toss it towards you. It's probably going to take less than a second for that object to hit you. Yet in that time, your eyes lock onto the object. You consciously identify that there's something traveling towards you. You start to move away from it, and perhaps you evade the object. You let it fly past you. All of that happens in less than a second. Your brain is not running on a gigahertz clock. You're realistically running at tens of kilohertz, even if you consider that there's a clock frequency inside of your brain. That gives you only a few moments in time for your brain to actually process something as complex as this object traveling towards you, identify its velocity, figure out that you actually need to move. Your brain is doing a lot of things. And that's a latency advantage that we tap into in our processing as well. We're able to find patterns very quickly. Another advantage is that our processors inherently are analog machines. So we're actually able to do our processing directly in the analog domain. And that means we can shrink the bill of materials around the sensor quite aggressively. And the last one, which is perhaps the most sensible in these times, is the fact that you do all of this processing local to the device. So you never take raw data out of the device, you never send it anywhere else. And that essentially means that you can do powerful things without violating someone's privacy. And I'm just looking forward, maybe one or two steps where neuromorphic computing will go in the future. Think about devices that can really adapt themselves to what's happening in the field. Your brain is able to learn things very quickly without needing thousands of data points, thousands of examples of a new movement. You're able to learn that pretty quickly in one or two different tries. That's really the power of what biological systems are able to do. They're able to learn on the fly. And this will be a very fundamental capability in intelligent systems of the future. How can you adapt functionality to perform in cases where you actually did not train the device to perform? That will be a very critical advantage of these systems.
Well, as I hear you talking about moving some of the processing actually to the sensor point rather than back at the processor, it sounds like what this does is disrupt the traditional architecture of a unit that might be at the edge of the network, where you wouldn't think of having sensors and a processing unit and then some sort of output, motors or whatever. Now you're taking some of that processing and moving it to the sensor block. Does that have a fundamental impact on the way these solutions are going to be designed?
Absolutely. Today, you've got sensors, pretty complex sensors going into all kinds of battery powered devices. Look at something like your doorbell. Look at your mobile phone, for instance. You're talking about anywhere between 10 to 20 sensors integrated inside of that single device. And all of that data needs to go somewhere, all of that data needs to be processed. Today, many of these devices really lack the efficient processing that it's going to take to use these sensors continuously in applications that require the sensors to run continuously. Think about, a smart watch that's looking at your heart rate throughout the day to identify if you're showing some kind of disease. That kind of processing is simply not possible on a continuing basis because you don't have processing that is as efficient as that application requires. So that's essentially the game that we are changing with our chips. We bring energy efficiency into these sort of applications directly to the sensor. So you can extract all of the insights that you need to have from sensor data as soon as it is captured without actually moving that data anywhere else. The consequence on systems is that, first of all, you get applications that weren't possible before. That's one. The second one is that you're now able to do much more powerful things without having a complex bill of materials with complex processors and very high performance processors that burn a lot of energy. You can really simplify what your system looks like using our chips, which are very tiny. They sit right next to the sensor and they open up a whole new world of application possibilities. And the third is really think about applications that deploy a lot of sensors. By having our intelligence embedded inside each one of these sensors, we're really simplifying what that entire unit looks like. You now no longer need basically a sensor with a computer sitting next to it. In essence, you essentially now have a sensor with the intelligence built inside of it, so that the data coming out of the sensor is directly actionable. It no longer requires any subsequent processing. So, in the simplest sense, you can consider that you've got a sensor which directly hooks up to a motor. And when the sensor detects an object, it instructs the motor to, let's say, open a door. And that changes, the level at which we're deploying intelligence into the world around us. Things just become smarter and much more accessible through deploying intelligence at this scale.
It sounds as though you are going to need to be developing at least a portion of an application for the sensor unit, for your chip sitting next to the sensor. How steep is the learning curve for someone coming out of a more traditional embedded systems background to now build your chip into their solution?
We designed our chips basically as microcontrollers. So our product now available in the market, it's called Pulsar. Pulsar is the world's first neuromorphic microcontroller. It combines our unique processing IP together with a RISC-V CPU, essentially providing embedded systems designers with all of the compute that they need in one single place. Um, from a programming standpoint, our toolchain is integrated with PyTorch, which means that you build all of your neuromorphic models directly in the PyTorch environment through an extension that we built for PyTorch that brings in these new brain-like neural network capabilities. Engineers already know how to build using PyTorch. You can actually start building using our toolchain right away. From an embedded systems design perspective, we built the toolchain really as tooling for a microcontroller. So you've got a special set, a special environment in which you code for your RISC-V, you code for your, traditional DNN accelerator, as well as the spiking neural network accelerator that we are famous for. You code all of that in a single code base. So it's very easy to integrate everything. You've got a simulator that lets you model what the entire system would behave like when you run this code. So you can actually do performance studies even before you put anything onto hardware. And from a hardware perspective, everything is integrated inside of a single chip. So from a programming perspective, from a development and debugging perspective, as well as from the final integration perspective, the entire objective here has been to put everything in one place and simplify that entire experience. So for a developer building using our tools, it would look like a microcontroller with a neural network extension sitting on top of it. That's essentially what it looks like to program, but the capabilities that it puts on the table are way beyond that.
Very good. Now, I can imagine all sorts of places where this would be an incredible solution for a problem that needs to be solved. Remote sensing units for scientific, environmental sorts of things, all the way up to fairly massive process control systems on a factory floor. To what extent, in your experience, are people designing systems where a fleet of these intelligent sensors built into a single fabric and are aware of one another and what's going on? Or does the architecture have to change if you're going into a very large system like that?
That's a very interesting question because it points directly at a development that we currently have ongoing today. This is not yet public, but I'll give you I'll give you sort of a feeling of what it is. Imagine that you've got thousands of sensors that together act as one. Each of these sensors is basically sitting in a different unit, and you get a completely different scale of insights when you look across all of these sensors and you start to see patterns of what's happening in the physical world. Each one of the data points that comes from every one of these devices uses one of our chips to really identify patterns in the sensor data that comes from that one single unit. And then when you take those insights from that one unit, and then when you extrapolate across the entire network of sensors, then you start to see patterns that were not visible before. So, really, this would be one of the first deployments of having localized intelligence at every cluster. And then, based on the results of that intelligence, you get a sort of a higher order intelligence where you see what's happening in the world around you. So, to kind of give you a real world example of what this might look like, imagine having sensors all around the city that can identify when there is aggression in different parts of the city. And then when you extrapolate that information across the entire city level from every camera, which is at every intersection in the city, now you start to see different patterns. You start to see different distributions. And the key here is, how do you limit the amount of information that is being captured from these edge nodes? And so that you don't need a gigantic data center sitting somewhere to process all of this information. It's possible to do more at the edge and then simplify the deployment and keep everything lean.
I need to ask, when we're talking about these intelligent sensors with your chip sitting next to a sensor, is this something that is bundling and is essentially selling the intelligent sensor packages, or are you working with partners to get this complete sensor package into the market?
We have great partnerships with sensor vendors. So we've partnered with Socionext, for instance, around their 60 gigahertz radar sensor. We have a similar partnership with Melexis on far infrared sensors. These are just two examples of recent partnerships that we have. And then we have more with companies like Arria Sensing around ultra wideband sensors. And the general idea here is that you've got a sensor that's very good at what it does, and it produces data which you need to interpret very efficiently. And that's essentially what we do in these systems. So by partnering with these companies, we come up with very tangible application solutions that customers can buy, integrating the sensor and the processor. And for a lot of these applications, there may also be software that either we've developed or our partners have developed or a third party company has developed. We have a number of combinations. So, simply put, we have integrated sensors and our processors available. We've got a portfolio of software which is already available. And we have a very powerful software development kit that customers can use to build their own applications beyond what we are selling on the market today. So a lot is possible.
As you look forward, can you see a day where many more kinds of sensors are available with intelligence on board? Is that something where the intelligence is going to spread throughout the entire realm of sensors?
Absolutely, and I think it goes even beyond that. So at this very moment, there are about 38 billion sensors active in the world, and that number in the next 4 years is going to grow to 63 billion. So we're going to add close to 20 billion new sensors, complex sensors in the world, and all of them will need their data to be processed somewhere. So that's the kind of opportunity we're looking at. That's where neuromorphic computing will go in the next few years. But there's also, looking at the growth of the robotics market, actuation and control will be very critical elements as well. So it's not only the sensor that's going to see intelligence, it's also the actuators, the actual control blocks that will see intelligence coming in. And there are many more places where it can come in. So, very frankly, we are only scratching the surface of what neuromorphic computing is able to do today. We're just looking at the perception systems. We're only mimicking how patterns can be found in data coming out of sensors. But there is so much more. There's so much more around actuation. There's so much more about learning and other aspects of the brain that we're not even thinking about because we don't have a real world problem that we can say, here's an analogy that can work and help us build something more efficient. I think in the next decade or so, we'll see a lot more of these applications coming out into the market, and the repercussions of all of those, the kind of application possibilities they will unblock, are just going to be mind blowing.
Outstanding. This has been a great conversation. And I want to end with a question that I ask pretty much everyone I talk to. That is there something that you wanted to tell me that I haven't asked about, that I haven't given you a chance to tell us about when it comes to Innatera and intelligence around sensors?
I think that we've been we're very positive about the kind of market that we are in. So many sensors selling in the world. We're also very powerful, very positive and optimistic about the capabilities of neuromorphic compute. And to actually get all of this rolling, what we did very recently is launch something called Synfire. Synfire is the first open repository for neuromorphic models. So the idea here is to create a vendor agnostic platform where developers of neuromorphic algorithms can upload their work targeting any platform. It doesn't have to be ours. It can be, anyone else in the industry. The idea is just to create this common body of work that people can tap into when they're building models. They can reuse existing pieces that other people build. And with all of this, I think that we will really be able to tap into what neuromorphic computing has to offer the world. So this is something I wanted to mention because building this developer base will be a very critical part in creating this very vibrant ecosystem for neuromorphic compute.
Well, Sumeet, my last question, if someone is now curious about these neuromorphic chips that you're making available, how do they learn about them? Where can they go to find out more about the chips and about the development environments for building software?
Our website has all of these resources. So we have a bunch of updated info on our website. I do have to say at the moment we've got so much interest on our kits. We are running a little behind in getting through to everyone. Even on our commercial side, we have a number of very exciting developments ongoing, and we're working to get more kits on the market. But all the information is available up there with Synfire, and we will have more resources available coming up for developers very soon. All of this will provide more information in the public domain and make much more of our technology accessible to everyone.
Well, Sumeet, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. I truly appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having another chance to talk with you in the future. It sounds like there's going to be much more to talk about going forward.
I'd love to be back here soon to tell you more. But thank you for having me today. It was great talking to you.
Now, we're going to be talking a lot about artificial intelligence moving forward, but we're going to be talking about many other things. You name it, if it's involved in embedded systems, it's fair game for us here. We hope that you will join us for all of these. Until next time, I'm Curtis Franklin, editor-in-chief of Circuit Cellar, and your host for the Circuit Cellar podcast, saying so long.
Learn more at circuitcellar.com.